the official form will be. Will we ever have an indication from these jurors, if they do convict, what it was that they felt was the underlying crime and how many of them thought it was which crime? So
All
we have
right,
so
folks,
many
so we have
questions.
streams coming in
Obviously, we're waiting to
live
see whether
from
any of these
everywhere right
jurors
now.
speak
The
out, whether
verdict is
today
in.
actually
You are
does
listening
wrap up
to
this case. We just
KLRNradio.com,
frankly hope more
KLR Radio
questions than
TV,
answers
digital
as the minutes
beacon
are ticking down to
US
finally getting some of
News.
those answers, we hope.
All right, and
We're just going to
one
stay with it
question, and
until we
Shannon, you
find
can
out
take
what's
it from me,
going
but I
on or
was
until it's
curious,
time to
and
do
this is
something
open
else.
to either one
So
of you.
hang out with us.
Obviously, if a guilty verdict comes across of one or two or several times, then it's up to the judge, and how does he handle that in terms of, sentencing? If it came to that, we're a long way from that. We don't know. But your thoughts?
The right thing to do in this instance, Neil, would be to treat this like you would treat other cases in this sense. This is a nonviolent crime. President Trump has no criminal record. This should be a no prison type sentence no matter how it comes out. He should be continued on the conditions that he's already under. He's obviously going to file a notice of appeal if he's convicted, which means this won't be resolved in a final way until sometime next year, if it's that early. And what'll happen is that sentencing will be postponed from now until the usual time's about 3 months. In this case, obviously, with the presidential election, that adds a layer of complication. But I would think that the judge would just continue him on release until a control date that's sentencing, probably about 3 months from now.
All right, Shannon, I'll let you take it from here. But again, before I do, I just want to let you know that the verdict has been reached in this Donald Trump hush money case. So Shannon and Andy, you have a lot to digest, and very quickly. To you folks.
We do. We do. All right, Neil, thank you very much. Okay, so Andy, I'll start back by bringing you in as our first official guest as we're on Verdict Watch here. Do you think we get a verdict now, or what is your sense that maybe they come back and say, because we know they were about to leave, at least we get everything third hand, but we don't know exactly what the jury has decided, but there'd been an indication that it was going to be a 4:30 dismissal, and then it's like, wait a minute, everybody here starts running, it's a verdict. Does that mean it has to be acquittal or conviction, or could we hear from them, we have reached an impasse?
So I think if they say verdict,
you think we've got a verdict? Okay.
And the other thing is it's too early to say we can't decide. I mean, they just started deliberating yesterday, and they were on the verge of coming back tomorrow. So it seems to me like it would be pointless to come back to the judge at this point and say we don't think we can resolve it, because the judge would say it's too early to say you can't resolve it. We've just virtually started. What's it been, less than 12 hours of deliberation, maybe 12 hours total. So I think if they say verdict, that means they have a verdict. Maybe I'm a little biased in that regard because I've convinced myself that it would be quick. But I think if they said verdict, there's a verdict.
Okay, so we will figure out who the foreperson is. We'll know some of what the jury has walked through and decided. Some of this, if there is a conviction, we won't know unless some of these jurors, one of these jurors decides to talk and tell us where they found that underlying crime, if they do convict, what it was, did they all agree on what it was, how much of this was pegged to federal election law, which we didn't have testimony from an expert witness here about that, whether it was tied to tax law, which we didn't hear much about that during the trial either, or whether it was the falsification of documents, in addition to the ones that are the misdemeanors now elevated to felonies. Do you think a juror talks? Will we ever really know what happened in that jury room?
I bet that there are jurors on this jury who are dying to talk. And I would be very surprised. And look, that would be any group of people, right, who were involved in something that was this historic. You would get some of them who wanted to speak. So, and the fact that some of them will want to speak will cause others of them to want to speak. So I think we'll find one or two at least who will tell us what went on. And I think we'll also find out how much of it was driven by what the judge instructed them, and that they doubled down on this morning by hearing so much of yet again. I really think the most important thing that happened in this case was the jury instructions, because nothing seemed to be set in stone or final in terms of what even the charges were until the judge gave them the instructions on the jury. Maybe you could say the summations, and particularly the prosecution summation, was at least a statement of where they finally planted their feet and said, here's what's charged. But that only happened after the parties knew what the judge was going to charge the jury. You know, they knew what the charge was it last Thursday?
Right, they had those.
I don't think there was a finality about this case until you got the end of that jury conference where they come up with what the charge is going to be. And it was as a result of that we found out in the summations where the prosecution was going, and to our surprise, that the jury didn't even necessarily have to be unanimously in agreement about some of the most important things in the case.
So, to your mind, if they come back with a conviction, as we wait, we have no idea at this point, it would say that they believed enough of what Michael Cohen had to say. We know that on the stand, there was plenty of testimony, and by his own admission and by pleas that he's made, that he had lied about a number of things to a number of people and bodies and entities. But the judge had told them that you can disregard somebody altogether if you feel like there's no credibility, but you can also take portions of what you believe that person said was actually true. So as much as the prosecution wanted to say this isn't solely about Cohen, we have other testimony, we have other people, we have other corroborating evidence. For the jury, you got to think that if they convict, they were willing to believe at least part of what Michael Cohen had to say.
So I think there's one of two interpretations that has to be correct. Either that one, that they actually decided to credit Cohen's testimony in important ways, or we have to conclude that the prosecution was successful in what I think they tried to do. I thought this was smoke and mirrors, frankly, but it might have worked. That they tried to project the idea that there were mountains of corroboration for Cohen's testimony. Now, it seems to me that there are parts of his testimony that are essential, like former President Trump's knowledge of how they were going to structure the payments to Cohen, that depend entirely on Cohen's testimony, and that they shouldn't be able to convict on the basis of, because under New York law, you can't convict where an accomplice has not been corroborated, right? But I think the prosecutors may have been able to convince the jury that between the documents and especially the way that Cohen's testimony echoed Pecker's testimony in a number of ways, that may have made the jury think that there actually was enough corroboration that they could credit Cohen in key places.
Okay, so we want to bring in Trey Gowdy as join us as well, a state and federal prosecutor as well. You've seen many jurors, you've seen many trials. What does this say to you? Because we thought they were leaving for the day. Then we get word that there is a verdict. What does that telegraph, if anything, to you?
If I were the prosecution, I would feel better than if I was the defense attorney. I think that the speed with which this happened, there were a couple of holdouts initially, and they are now of one accord.
Do you think maybe they were convinced, whatever the disagreement was, if there was a disagreement, the ask for the Pecker testimony, the Cohen testimony, for the rereading of the jury instructions, do you think the fact that we didn't hear from them again after that, that one section or that one conflict was what they needed to get to something now?
I think the jury instruction was pretty pro-prosecution. I think a lot of the evidentiary rulings were pro-prosecution. So what you're going to get with a verdict is pretty much what you've gotten up to that point. What are the rulings? What evidence has come in? What evidence has been excluded? So the FEC expert, they never heard from. So the jury is only as good as the information they're giving.
Well, and so that gets to my question. You all you've handled some very high-profile cases. Is there a situation when afterwards jurors may hear more of the story, things that were excluded, things that the defense argued for and could not get in, and then possibly hearing from a juror at another point, oh, we didn't know this was an option, that was an option, we didn't know they excluded an expert who may have been able to tell us more about federal election law. I guess that's the kind of thing that if they talk, we could finally get some more information from them about how those decisions impacted where they got to eventually.
There have been many cases where the juries after they bring in a verdict, they learn in the media that there were aspects of the case that they were not aware of and that they wish they had been aware of. Sometimes they have some, buyer's remorse about the verdict, and that can play into that. Sometimes they authentically do hear information that they wish they had had and didn't. I think, Shannon, a big part, and Trey could probably speak to this as well, a big part to me of the difference between this case and the big cases I've been involved in is in federal court, in big cases, judges are they're loath at the idea of stopping the defense from proving things that the defense says are essential to their case. So in these big cases where you don't want to get reversed and where it would be a real resource strain on the system to have to retry the case, if the defense tells you, my defense hinges on having Bradley Smith come in and explain to the jury what a campaign expenditure is, because if they don't hear from somebody who actually has knowledge about the subject, it'll be like they're being instructed by Michael Cohen and David Pecker, which is in fact what happened in this case. Most judges I've ever been in front of would be very hesitant not to let that testimony come in. So in those cases, you don't have the situation where they learned afterwards that there were important things that were withheld from them.
And I think it's important for your viewers to understand why Andy just said what he said. So if you're a judge and you rule against the prosecution and the prosecution wins, there is no appeal because the prosecution won. So there is almost this built-in incentive to rule for the defense, because if the defendant loses and there's an appeal, the judge can very well get reversed and get his or her hand slapped. So the bias is usually to let the defense do more, arguably, than sometimes they're entitled to do. That was not Judge Merchan's perspective, not for the 4 days I was in the courtroom.
Okay, stay put, guys. I think Judge Janine is available for us as well. Judge, if you can hear me, what do you make of where we are right now? There are not many people out there who think that an acquittal is possible, but anything is possible. We don't know where these jurors are going, but we do know that we'll learn soon. Judge, what does your gut tell you, having presided over many of these cases
If
yourself?
you're just tuning in, this is KLRNradio.com, KLRND, Digital Beacon U.S. news coverage of the imminent Trump verdict. Right now we're jipping the Fox News feed, looking to see what else we can find.
Andy McCarthy we're talking about, and that
Stay with
is
us.
the issue of the judge not allowing the defense to present the case that they needed to in order to represent their client properly. And most important is the fact that, the bringing into testimony of the fact that Michael Cohen is guilty of a federal election law violation, and that David Pecker had a non-prosecution agreement as it relates to the federal election law. And the judge says, I let these in because they go to credibility and because they give you context. Well, anyone who understands Molyneux in New York, which is a case in New York, knows that the federal election violations are not generally considered credibility crimes. Lying and perjury and stealing is. But when the judge says, I give it to you for context, what was really going on here in this case, and we didn't know it until we got to the charge to the jury, was that the judge was signaling to the jury, Michael Cohen, as a matter of law, is aiding and abetting and complicit with Donald Trump in a federal election law violation, which, even though I only allowed it for credibility, the truth is he's being charged with aiding and abetting Trump. And so this is a very easy hurdle for the jury to say, yeah, Pecker and Cohen got slammed for it. Should Donald Trump be slammed for it? And plus the issue of not being able to bring in Brad Smith, the issue of not having an adverse charge for a missing witness, that missing witness being the chief financial officer, Alan Weisenberg, who could talk about the fact that as it related to vouchers, invoices, and checks, Donald Cohen had nothing to do with it. There was no testimony testimony about that at all in the transcript. And the one thing that the jurors asked about that meeting at Trump Tower, Donald Trump said 3 times, "I don't pay for stories. I don't pay for stories." And the defense made it very clear that this catch and kill wasn't in any of the 3 cases that the prosecution was alleging. A lot of this was smoke and mirrors. I can understand that if a jury makes a decision this quickly, that, you know,
All right, so we're changing feeds. Bear with me for just a moment here. I'm going to see if we can find something else because, yeah, I know you guys aren't tuning into me to listen to Judge Janine, so bear with me for just a moment.
That apparently the judge was handed a note, and then Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche, leaned over to him and was whispering to Trump. And then at that point, there were audible gasps in the courtroom when the verdict was announced. Again, because nobody had anticipated this. She says that Trump was, of course, sitting at the defense table. His arms were crossed in front of him. You know, when you sit, you have your arms crossed. And that around 10 of 5, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg entered the courtroom. So he is in the courtroom now. So there is a verdict. When that verdict is going to be read, we're not sure. That could be read in the next 10 minutes, 20 minutes. We are not sure. Usually once they say that a verdict has been reached, they usually end up announcing what that verdict is within about 30 minutes. They need everybody that's involved with the case, all the pertinent players, to be in the courtroom at the time of that reading. So that could happen at any moment. But this is one of those cases where this is history making. And again, there was a lot of pressure on this jury, I'm sure, for all of them to get this right, because this is now the first president who has not only been indicted in a criminal trial, he has sat at a defense table at a criminal trial, and he is about to hear the verdict in his criminal trial. Now, in the event that he would be found guilty, there would not be a sentencing at this point because his attorneys would likely appeal. So there would not be a sentencing. In addition to that, it will be the judge who imposes the sentencing, Judge Juan Merchan. Do you guys have any questions for me at this point?
All right, that was very, very interesting as we're now getting breaking news in here to our newsroom talking about all the latest as we are now learning that the former president has been found guilty on all counts there in this hush money trial. Nima Rahmani back here in on live now from Fox. Thank you so much for joining us. We're seeing high atop there, guilty on accounts. You predicted kind of what's going on, but this is an unprecedented. Can you kind of give me a sense of just the ramifications of this?
And a really historic moment that we are seeing a former president dragged into criminal court, being held accountable, being convicted of 34 felony counts by 12 members of the community.
Well, they just guaranteed he's going to be president of the United States, number 47. I am calling it now, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just joining us, Donald Trump has been convicted on all counts. Sentencing will not happen now, so we're going to go back over to Fox News for a second, listen to what they've got to say about all of this, and then go from there. Did I pause it? I didn't actually mean to pause it. Hang on. I thought I just turned the volume down over there. Let me fix that, because now I'm going to have to move forward a little bit if it will let me. All right. All right, so for those of you listening on the streams, I'm about to change over. Hang on.
Spectrum, who said this feels like the weakest case against President Trump. Something changed along the way. How much of this had to do with the guidance from Judge Merchan, whether it was the jury instructions, whether it was the decisions on objections, whether it was the decision not to let in certain witnesses that the defense wanted to call?
Ladies and gentlemen,
all of the above. The verdict is a necessary and probable consequence of everything that happens up to that point. So that includes jury
This
selection.
is the
It includes
stupidest thing
evidentiary
that I have
rulings.
ever
I was
seen
in the
in my
courtroom or
life,
the
and I
overflow
wish I
room
could
4
say I
different
was
days.
surprised.
Shannon, it wasn't
All
just
right,
the
I'm gonna bring the
result
volume
of
down
Judge
on this stuff
Merchan's
because
rulings.
I
The
don't
tone
know.
of his
I
voice was different depending on which side was doing
I
the
guess
objecting. So look, I
I
said
would
a
like to
week
say I'm
ago,
surprised, ladies and
juries
gentlemen.
usually get it
I
right.
really, really, really would like to say that I'm surprised. However, here we sit with the president, former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, being found guilty on all charges, all 34 counts, most of which were tied to the same thing, and most of which weren't even technically a crime. So, yeah, I hope your Thursday is going better than his. That's all I'm going to say about that. Because, wow, um, even I was kind of expecting that we were going to wind up getting maybe like a hung jury, maybe. We didn't though. Am I still not broadcasting? Jesus Christ! It's showing I'm broadcasting. When was that? Was that no? That was forever ago. Okay. Yeah, I hate when the chat does that. Anyway, so yeah, chat was behind in the station side, so I thought we were having technical issues that I actually had to scrub the afternoon show, or at least most of it, until the verdict came in, and then I decided to go live with that. But yeah, so here we are, ladies and gentlemen. In case you are just figuring it out, Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 counts of the hush money trial with Stormy Daniels, and I would love to say that I was surprised. However, I can't really say that I was surprised. Anyway, all right, we're gonna probably shut things down. Yeah, why not? I need to go charge my phone now anyway. Because yeah, fun times. Anyway, all right. You know what? Let's just do this. I don't want to get in any more trouble today. Things are just now finally starting to work again. So we're going to go out with some safe music that's stored over here because everybody will get to hear it. I don't know. I don't know what I want to go out with, though. Definitely not really. Maybe just some acoustic because I ain't feeling much else right now. All right. Waiting for that to start here. All right, folks. You guys enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'll be back tonight doing the Jen and Rick Show live right here on KLRNRadio.com. This concludes a breaking news segment. As a reminder, former President Donald J. Trump found guilty on all 34 counts. Welcome to the Banana Republic of America. You have a great afternoon.